tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal, it's hit him on the pad, he's out! Lions gone, New South Wales are 9 down! Onto Sydney Road, and it hit a car! Oh, I think it's hit a car! What a way to bring up your 50!
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Menners, and it is the night before the second test starts in the Ashes. Australia looking to go 2-0 up in this series. I'm excited. I'm trying to sort of shift the body clock now, staying up late. Going to be recording episodes after every day of the action. So unprecedented coverage from Cricket Unfiltered. And joining me, of course, is cricket broadcaster Damien Watson. Damien, since I've seen you, I've been to Perth and back. I've seen a 2-day test, but I've missed you.
Oh, I'm sure you have, Betters. I've missed you as well. At least you got a bit of tourist time as a result of the 2-day test match. Did you take in many sights of Perth?
Well, I had 3 days to take in the sights, and I did beautiful walks by the Swan River, and it's a lovely city. I haven't been there for a long time, over 20 years, so it's changed a lot. But I had a delightful time. Would have liked a little bit more cricket, but you know, I was saying to someone, if you'd said to me at lunch on the second day, you've got two options: Australia win on the second afternoon or they lose on the fourth day, I would take a 2-day test every time if that meant an Aussie victory. So, yeah, I'm excited. Lots of news around this second test we'll get into in a moment. Big response to the last episode I did on the weekend. Obviously, I re-released the Johnny Bairstow blow-up after the second test, so that's on YouTube. There's been some very kind comments. Thank you for everybody who's watched it again and shared it. Also, Jim Carnegie wrote to me. He was very upset that I called Higgos from the Grey Cricketer an arsehole. Obviously, I'm just having a bit of a joke about the whole beef thing. Just relax, Jim. Higgos, I'm not going to say he's not an asshole because I'm not sure, but just settle down, Jim. Just settle down. But yeah, huge response to the last episode. So thanks everybody that reached out. That was the Ashes mailbag. And before we get into the big news, Damien, did you see today or yesterday that the England cricket team had been busted driving e-scooters with no helmets? I mean, this is great journalism. Whoever's papped them for the Courier Mail or whichever fine paper it was, that's excellent. And I think the police have let them off, but that would be typical England for one of them to fall off an e-scooter, get injured, and miss a test match.
Oh, then again, we had Glenn McGrath stood on the ball and cost us probably the second test in 2005, Betters. So we've had our fair share of unlucky circumstances as well when it comes to that. But yeah, I mean, quite remarkable. How come they get let off? What makes them so special, Betters?
I'm not sure. I think they should have to pay the fines. Absolutely.
I think so. If I got caught, I would have to pay the fine.
It's a very bad example they're setting, especially, all the English fans that have come out here drunk, the Barmy Army, they see the English team doing it. They do the same thing. One of them gets hit by a tram or a taxi or something, and all of a sudden we're not laughing about it. So I agree they should throw the book at these Poms for breaking the law. And I think McGrath stepping on a ball and them riding around in e-scooters are very different. But I think, wasn't there the Flintoff one where he fell off the boat? Was that in the World Cup in 2007? When they fell off a boat. Anyway, and we've got the Gower flying the plane across. He didn't quite fall out there, but ran into some trouble for doing that. So yeah, this English team, they just can't keep it together. I mean, this tour could go off the rails very quickly. If they lose this second test, I can see it being a complete shit show for them.
I think it was a Pedalo boat that Flintoff fell off in 2007 in the Caribbean. So, yeah, work hard, play hard. But, yeah, look, we've seen in the past, haven't we, Menners? If they go 2-0 down, more often than not, England buckle under the pressure and you get the sense that the tours are all over. So you're right. I think it's a very crucial element for the psychological state of England and the cricket team, this test match, because if they go 2-0 down away from home to get back from that, how often has it been erased and arrested and going back the other way? Not very often.
Well, I think it's only been done once in a test series, a side coming down back from 2-0 down, and that was in the 36-37 Ashes in Australia, where England were up 2-0, and then Bradman in the third test went 270, in the fourth test went 212, and in the fifth test went 169. So unless England have someone like Don Bradman waiting in the sheds, I don't think they're going to have much chance of coming back from 2-0 down. Now, we have a lot to talk about. Preview the second test. Let's start today with the Aussies. So Steve Smith was speaking at the Gabba, and he has failed to reveal the 11 for Australia. There's no confirmation of any selections other than Usman Khawaja has been ruled out with his back injury. So you would assume Head will open the batting, but nothing has been confirmed. So I guess the positions in doubt, Damien, would be whether Inglis or Webster comes in. It seems like Inglis is the favourite to come in. And then if, say, Inglis comes in where he bats, I personally think they should stick with Head at the top of the order for at least the rest of the series, because he wants to do it. He put England to the sword in the first test, put him at the top of the order and bring Inglis in at 6. I'd move Green up to 5. And Inglis, I think, is your perfect counter-attacking number 6 who can come in with the soft ball. So that's what I'd be leaning towards. But, they could put Inglis up to open. He opened for, I think, a CA 11 versus the England Lions. He also they could also bring Webster in if they want the bowling. So there are a few options, but I'd like to see Head open. What about you?
Well, first of all, I think it's a good thing in a way and somewhat smart for Australia to keep their cards close to their chest and keep England guessing, because it could go a number of ways, couldn't it? So I think that's a relatively smart thing. It's not often these opportunities come to do that in a way. So I think from a tactical point of view, a good move.
Now, also on that, England admitted that they were rattled when they saw Travis Head coming out to bat in Perth. So clearly they haven't, worked through all the scenarios, because, they spend a lot of time on the golf course, not a lot of time working different scenarios. So therefore, you're absolutely right. Why not wait till the final moment to announce the team? And then England, I'm sure they'll have a few plans floating around now, but rather than them going to bed tonight knowing the Aussie team.
I think so. Exactly right. You make a salient point, and it's quite unusual for them to admit that they were rattled in that situation as well, Menners, because in Australia is going to try and do the same thing, and that's exactly what's happening. But just in relation to the, I guess, selected conundrum between Inglis and Webster, I suppose with Webster, you're right, he does have that added weaponry where he can bowl. He's probably bowled more medium pace in recent times, if memory serves me correct, compared to, it used to be a bit of an off spin, probably bowled more so the off spin and then reverted to the medium pace on the odd occasion. Maybe that's reversed a little bit, but he does provide that flexibility. And to be honest, he hasn't done much wrong when he's been in the Australian colours, Menners. So, he'd be pretty stiff to miss out, but I see your point in regards to Inglis. He has that attacking frame of mind, which you want to do. You want to put the opposition to the sword. So I think it comes down to, what you want in that respect. You got versatility versus attacking weaponry, and which one do you use?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Inglis is class. He's made a century in all formats for Australia. So, I wouldn't mind seeing him picked. Absolutely love Inglis. Just on Head opening with Weatherald. So I think this actually is a bit of a conundrum for the Aussie selectors, because they clearly didn't plan for this. And Jake Weatherald was picked to be sort of aggressive top order player to be a sort of contrast to Usman Khawaja. But now they've actually got 2 aggressive players, because Head's gone up there and he's going to partner with Weatherald. So I don't know if this is the ideal combination that Australia were planning for, but much like Hayden and Langer, maybe they've stumbled across a good combination and you just have to embrace it. I wonder where this leaves Matt Renshaw, and if I was Jake Weatherald, I would want to make runs and bed down this spot because I think the selectors will be pretty keen to get Renshaw in if one of them stutters at the top of the order. So, and Head and Renshaw is a good combination as well. So, I think a lot to prove for this opening partnership.
Yeah, I think you're right. You took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, the Langer-Hayden scenario, that was sort of accidental as well. I mean, the only reason Langer got reselected back into that Australian lineup and at the top of the order was because Michael Slater had those issues in the 2001 Ashes series. And he was a pretty aggressive opener in his own right, but Langer had that extra level of aggression and could make big scores as well, and complemented Hayden. And they became arguably one of the best opening partners in Test history. So not suggesting that's going to happen here. I mean, Weatherald did have, an inauspicious first innings, but I thought he was pretty good in the second innings, complemented Head quite well. I don't think you necessarily need, whilst it's an okay thing to have that balance, to have a conservative player at the top of the order alongside an attacker. I mean, if you've got two players attacking well and complementing each other, I think it places even more pressure on the opposition. So as long as you get the runs and the results, Menners, I don't think it really matters. And particularly in quick fashion to really unsettle the opposition, I don't think it really matters what styles you have.
Oh, absolutely. And Weatherald and Head have that relationship opening a lot for the Adelaide Strikers and playing a lot of domestic cricket together. So they could forge a great bond. So fingers crossed they do. The other big question mark is Cummins. There is a lot of speculation Cummins could make a return to the Test side. It hasn't been confirmed, but he's been seen talking very closely with Andrew McDonald at the centre of the Gabba. And Steve Smith said today that if Cummins comes back in, Cummins will obviously be straight back into the captaincy. But it's amazing that the day before the Test match, we're not really sure who's going to captain Australia. And Cummins, is still definitely a chance of playing in this Test. And wouldn't that be a blow for England before a ball's bowled if they see Pat Cummins walking out to toss the coin, and Joe Root and all the England batters knowing they're going to have to face him with the pink ball? And I think that also follows on into my next question about whether Nathan Lyon will play in this Test match. There's been some speculation that Nathan Lyon may miss out this Test match, whether you need a spinner. So, maybe if you don't need a spinner, you bring Cummins in for Lyon. He can bat at 8. And, he's not required to bowl as many overs. But personally, I would stick with a spinner because, I think people are forgetting that this pink ball Test is being played at the Gabba, which are different conditions to at the Adelaide Oval. The ball goes softer and it can be better for batting. It's still obviously a new ball's going to move around under lights, but there's usually less grass on the Gabba wicket. So I think Lyon would be important if England's batting lineup gets going and you need a change of pace. But, so many options, Damien. And, it's incredible that the day before the Test match, there's so many balls in the air.
I think it's good. It keeps the opposition guessing. But I tend to agree. You want that, if it's ideal and the conditions that are ideal for it, you want that versatility, don't you? That unpredictability. We know Nathan Lyon's pretty good under pressure as well. But with Pat Cummins, I suppose this second Test is the one that's been earmarked, hasn't it, for a few weeks, ever since it looked like he was progressing better than expected. The second Test was earmarked, wasn't it, Menners, as the introductory point for him for this series. And then maybe, depending on the result, he gets rested for the third Test and you bring him back for Melbourne and Sydney. So it will be interesting. But I think would you say it's a deliberate ploy that they're keeping everyone guessing as to whether he's going to play? Surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot is up to Pat Cummins himself, how his body's feeling. You're right. The last week or two, the speculation around him being ready for this Test match has grown and grown. I just don't know what their play is, whether it's to keep England guessing or, it's been such a close run thing. I know Pat Cummins had to pass some, fitness assessments on Monday. And then, so he would have had a big bowl then, probably wants to see how he pulls up today. So I guess it is a very close run thing, but, we talked about 2-0 before, it isn't, people are saying, because Australia or 1-0 up, why rush him back? And I don't think you should rush him back if it's going to jeopardize his long-term future. But if he's fit, you've got a chance here now to give England another big uppercut and maybe send them out of the series when you go 2-0 up. So bringing Cummins in if he's fit, I think would be very smart.
Yeah, I think so. And again, he adds that versatility because he's an all-rounder, Menners. And I think you're right. I think it provides a bit of a psychological blow to the opposition. But you got to make sure he's right too. I mean, back injury is not something, as we've seen over the years, Menners. You don't want to mess with it too much, particularly at his age. So I think as long as he's feeling right and they get some medical all clear, I think he'd be a great boom for the Australian team.
Yeah, yeah. I would like my cake. I want to have my cake and eat it too. So I'd love Cummins to play, but Smith to still captain. But unfortunately, I just don't think I'm going to get that. But the way Smith was captaining in Perth, he's a magician. He's a magician the way he moves the field and the bowlers around. So I'm sure Cummins will be leaning on him pretty heavily. All right. So I said before that Usman Khawaja has been ruled out of this test match. He's back flared up again. There's been reports in the Sydney Morning Herald that Khawaja is not going to retire, that he's going to stick around for the rest of the series and play if needed. So firstly, I think he's had a bad week, Usman Khawaja. You know, he obviously had that poor performance in the first test. Then he made those comments about the Perth pitch being a shit pitch on day one. Today, the news is broken that he's escaped sanction for those comments, which, look, I think that's sensible. You know, that was a charity function. It seemed like a very casual atmosphere, and I don't think you should fine him. You know, we don't want athletes being scared to make any sort of personal opinions. But, you know, I just think overall, this has been a pretty bad week for Usman. He's put the cheeky little post up with the golf image, and you know, you can't win when you start taking on the Australian public. You know, you're only going to lose when you start to, you know, poke at them. And you know, so I think probably a good thing that his back's gone, and it's probably saved him from being axed. I think probably he would have been dropped.
Potentially. Do you think the public's view of him has really waned over this little period in general when you ask the mainstream?
Oh, look, I think if he retires and bows out now, I think you'll still look at the totality of his career. And, you know, he's not the first Australian player to hang on a bit too long. I think he's been a great servant of Australian cricket. You know, he is very opinionated. He's very arrogant. He's very strong-willed. You know, this is not just me saying it. I've heard this from a number of people. You know, I get around, you know, talking to different people in press boxes have had a lot to do with him. You know, it's his nature. That's just the way he carries himself. But that's what you need to succeed at the top level. You know, if you're going to go out and take on the best bowlers in the world, you need an incredible amount of self-belief. And if that is rubbed up a few people the wrong way, then, you know, that can happen. But just with the photos and the golf course, I just think, you know, if you shouldn't be playing golf, you know, it looks bad. If you play golf 3 days in a row before a test match and then your back goes, I'm sorry, you just have to own it. You're not better. You're not going to win if you start poking back with photos that sort of make fun of the Aussie public, because they're, you know, apparently he's the people's champ. So he should act like that. But, you know, you look at his career, 85 test matches, 6,055 runs, 1600s, 27 50s, an average of 43.56. I mean, that average about 2 years ago was up around 48. So it's really starting to drop down in the last 2 years. You know, there's been a significant waning of his form. And also, look, I push back on this as well. You know, there's this, Khawaja's been hard done by in selection rooms in the past. I think in the past he was pretty loose outside off stump. He could get out in soft dismissals. When Warner and Smith were away, he didn't really stand up when Australian cricket needed him. He went through a bit of a rough trot. So I think when he's been dropped, there's been more merit in those decisions. Not all of them. He's been dropped like 5 times. But, you know, I don't think he's been as hard done by as he carries on about. And, you know, I think the big thing about the second half of his career is, if you look really closely, he's been way more disciplined outside off stump. And that's what really, you know, supercharged that second phase of his career when he came back 4 years ago. So, but overall, you know, it was Usman Khawaja's debut in 2010-11 at the SCG, where I think he made the best 37 ever or something. And then I was at his last test maybe at Perth. And, you know, he's had a really good career. And that 2-year run where he came back into the side and was the best opener in the world, that was something special. It's a shame he wasn't able to continue with that great form in the last 2 years. And I think he's sort of his own worst enemy, because he could have retired, you know, maybe last summer against India and gone out a bit of a hero, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you look at what happened with Queensland last year as well, Manners. Do you get the sense he's ruffled a few feathers within? I suppose David Warner had the same sort of, in a different way, the same sort of reverberation around him when you talk to people within cricket, and that he could be a polarising figure. And I think Khawaja was just that. But you've got to admire him, I guess, for the way he rebuilt his career. I think that elevates him from, would you say, good to great, or is it too far saying he was a great?
Yeah, definitely not a great. Good player, very good player, but not a great. And he had two really golden runs for me. There was that sort of 2016, 17 period. He made a lot of runs. And then there was that period where he came back into the side and made a stack of runs. And as I said, when Smith and Warner was suspended after Sandpaper Gate, I think there was, feeling from me that, Khawaja needs to stand up here and lead this team with the bat, and he just wasn't able to do that. But yeah, good player, and I do think we've seen the last of him. People are asking whether he'll get a swan song. I don't think so. I think we'll never see him play Test cricket for Australia again, and I think that is 100% the right decision. And George Bailey dodged a bullet. Steve Waugh said to them, "You got to make your tough calls." They were going to have to make one for this Test match, but Uzi's back has saved their blushes, so to speak, Damien.
Potentially, but then, by bringing him into the squad, does it detract from the preparation of others who could have filled that spot? I mean, they've stumbled probably across potentially a good opening partnership as a result, and that's just luck's a fortune. But, it's weird how life works out, isn't it?
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take our first break on this episode, and then we'll be back to talk about the England side as they go into this second test. Welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Manners. I'm with Damien Watson, and it's the night before the second test. We are finishing our preview of the second test, and then we have to get to some other cricket news, Damien, because I said on the last podcast I've been overrun with Ashes fever, but the WBBL is going on. There's other bits of cricket news that I want to get to. But before that, let's talk about England, and I'm going to stick the boot in because they've had some clangers this week. Firstly, unlike Australia, they have named their squad. Will Jacks is coming in to bat at number 8, the batting all-rounder who bowls off spin. He's replacing Mark Wood, who's out injured. Big loss for England, no Mark Wood, obviously. But you just have to wonder what sort of contribution he'll make in the Ashes. I mean, he was built up for years to play in the series. He bowled 10 overs in Perth, and he's out for a Test match. I mean, he just doesn't have the action that can stand up to the rigors of Test cricket. Will Jacks coming to the side. That's an interesting one. He was picked in the squad, so it was kind of foreshadowed they were going to try and do this. I think it's a negative move. I think whenever you stick a batter at 8, it shows you don't have faith in your top order. So I don't imagine this will do well. I would have brought in another quick bowler like a Josh Tongue or a Matthew Potts and tried to fight fire with fire here. But yeah, what do you think, Damien?
Well, I think with Tongue, isn't the perception that he can be a bit inconsistent? His best form is very good, but it tapers off sometimes. So maybe that's swayed away from him being selected. Just in relation to Wood, wasn't there talk anyway? I remember in the lead up to the first test, there were issues with his back during the tour game that they had against the England Lions. So I'm not entirely surprised by this whole outcome. Do you think maybe they could have been a bit more proactive about managing him and having a contingency? I'm sure they had a contingency plan, but it just seems as if they tried to throw at the stumps and it didn't work.
Absolutely. They took a punt with him. It didn't work out. And now a lot of pressure rests on Jofra Archer. All right. So some stuff from the English camp this week. Ben Stokes came out and said, "Don't call us arrogant. You can call us rubbish." What an arrogant thing to say. You cannot tell people how you are perceived. All right. You are perceived by people because of your actions. If people perceive that you are arrogant, you can't say, "Oh, don't perceive us that way. You can call us rubbish." That is such an arrogant attitude. This is why people are turning against you, Ben. You've just got to take it on the chin and say, "Look, we're going to do better to change that perception around. It's on us for our behaviour. We're going to try and change it. So, again, another clanger from Stokes in the press conference. He did apologise for calling former cricketers has-beens, said it was a slip of the tongue and, a misuse of the English language. Two things. Firstly, no surprises that Ben Stokes wouldn't be the great orator and be able to use the English language. So it could have been a slip of the tongue, but also I probably think it's actually what he thinks deep down, and he was just trying to cover his tracks. But Damien, that is so dumb to say, don't call us arrogant. Well, if people think you're arrogant, that's what they think.
I think, is it an element of, though, him trying to stand up for his side in the media? I think he has that ingrained attitude. And I suppose somewhat I can understand it. If you're getting attacked in the media and by certain quarters, you stand up for your side. And I think he's trying to send a message by doing so and being aggressive.
Yeah. Well, wrong message. I mean, if you're being called arrogant, the worst thing you can say is don't call us arrogant. All right, next thing. And this is coming from the English media. This is less coming from the players, but I think the players think this, but we're not hearing it as much. Joe Root was quoted saying he doesn't think the Ashes needs a pink ball test, but his comments were amongst others that did soften those comments. But I can tell you, Damien, the English media, all of them, Henry Blofeld, Michael Vaughan, all the written press, they're pushing this bloody agenda that the pink ball test is an unfair advantage for Australia in the Ashes. I mean, these whinging Poms, they can see the loss on the horizon, and it spooked them. They're now, we shouldn't have to play this pink ball test. They've known about this pink ball test for years. And look, one of the reasons why in Australia cricket is not suffocated by football all the time is because Cricket Australia makes these tough decisions. They go, we're going to put a pink ball test on because then the fans can get home from work and watch the bloody cricket, because the fans are the people that keep the game alive. The broadcasters keep the game alive. And this is such typical English whinging, to be complaining about the pink ball test. They have known about this for years. They could have prepared for it more. They could have arranged another pink ball game if they wanted, but they've opted for centre wicket practice. Damien, this is so typically English, isn't it? To just start whinging about something. They've been playing pink ball cricket in Australia for over 10 years now.
Completely agree with you, Menners, and it's why cricket is in a far better place in Australia compared to England with the public. They've stuck with tradition for how many years? And look, you could make the argument it's probably dwindling amongst the mainstream in England outside of an Ashes series or a series against India, because they haven't been innovative at all. I know they probably don't have the lighting infrastructure in some grounds, but they do in others. Why can't they stage a pink ball test? Why don't they, as you said, adjust to the conditions by, staging either having a tour match against one of the state sides in those sorts of conditions, or, go training at night time, Menners. That's part of your job. They're full-time cricketers, at the end of the day. So I tend to agree with you. I think they're a bit scared. Why else would they be whinging about it? Because they know that they don't have much of a chance.
That's right. I mean, there's been a total of 24 pink ball tests played around the world. Australia has hosted 13, played 14 because we played one in the West Indies earlier this year, and we've won 13 of those 14. We've only lost one, which was at the Gabba to the West Indies a couple of years ago, the famous Shamar Joseph game. Now, I think England has played 7 pink ball games and maybe won a couple. I don't have those records with me, but they certainly have played less, but that's just on their scheduling. And I just think it's so typical that we haven't heard anything about the pink ball test. And now that it's looming, they're all scared that they're going to lose. So they're saying, this is unfair, blah, 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 blah. When we go to Trent Bridge or Leeds and we don't say,
yep,
these conditions, we don't like them, they're too green for us or whatever, can you change them? I mean, it's just typical whinging. So I think, they do need it for the Ashes. I mean, the ratings are going to go through the roof. So figures have come out that from KO Sports that Travis Head's innings that day of Test cricket is the highest watched day of Test cricket in KO Sports history. Now, that works out because in Perth, it's coming through to Australia on prime time. And this Ashes Test match is going to light up the country in prime time. And it's typical of this English press to have no idea about that stuff, to just be obsessed with the fact that, it's such a loser mentality. Like if Australia was scheduled a pink ball test in England, we wouldn't be crying about how unfair it is. So, yeah, not surprising at all.
I completely agree. When you it's like custom, isn't it? When you come here, you play by our rules in terms of scheduling. And at the end of the day, Menners, why do you think they get so much money from revenue from the Ashes series, and more than you would if you go with the traditional method? It's from the broadcasters, the money. It's from the fans. More fans can go to the game. That fills the players' pockets. That includes the English players.
Absolutely. And I think Australian cricket has the balance right. I think one pink ball test a summer is perfect. I wouldn't want two. I think one is a perfect because you got the Perth test that, comes through to the eastern states at a good time, and you've got the pink ball test. I think it's really, really good. I do think it's strange that for the 2027 150th anniversary test, they're playing that as a pink ball test at the MCG, only because I think all the old blokes there will start falling asleep by the last session. But apart from that, I think you've got to look after the fans, and otherwise you get in a position like England's in, where everybody's watching football. And why are they watching football? Because it's on every night in England in prime time. If you're in England, football is on every night. It's not on during the day when they're at work. So
well, if it is during the day, it's on the weekend, right? So
exactly, but it's not Monday to Friday during the day. And so Australia being smart about cricket, we're nurturing cricket, and you just listen. If England lose this game, they'll just be whinging. Oh, unfair. They've got to stop playing pink ball cricket. If they win, if they win, we'll never hear it. We'll never hear about it. Never hear about it again. They'll be thrilled. All right. Just speaking of spirit of cricket, for those watching on YouTube, I've got my Ben Stokes I've got my unemployment office t-shirt on. So there's lots of great t-shirts in the Cricket Unfiltered merch store. We've got a trap ball, moral victory, all sorts of stuff. The Bairstow run out. So a lot of people are buying them. So really appreciate all the support for that. I guess that's it for all the Ashes. My prediction is Australia are going to steamroll them in this game. I think it's going to be 2-0, and I think this series is headed towards an absolute killing of England. I mean, I just can't see them getting off the canvas. I guess the only way that happens is if, they're bowling at the right time and they get a bit of luck against Australia. But I think England are done. I think that first test will be the killer blow, and I'm expecting, a huge performance from Australia in this game. And I'm probably expecting a 3-day test, maybe 3.5 days if we're lucky. What about you?
I think it'll be a little bit tighter. I think traditionally, it's similar to what we saw in Perth, actually, because it wasn't, even though it looks convincing when you look at the final scorecard, Menners, it wasn't convincing throughout the 2 days. There were times where England were on top. So I think it'll be a little bit tighter because with the day-night test, if they're bowling at the right time, England, you just never know what can happen. So I think traditionally they can be tighter test matches, the pink ball test. So I think Australia to win, but I think it'll be tighter than what we would expect. Just having a look, what's the forecast for Brisbane over the coming days? Because we know they've had a lot of rain up in that part of the world for the last 12 months, and it looks as if it's going to be nice, except for on Sunday where there's storms forecast, Menners.
Great. Well, might not get to Sunday. Cricket Australia will be bloody hoping it does. All right, well, that's our preview of the second test. Now let's get into some other cricket news. And look, let me start off with the sad news about the passing of Robin Smith. It is very sad news. He was at the Perth Test match. He made a number of media appearances, and he's been very open about his struggles with mental health and alcoholism that severely affected his health and gave him life-threatening illnesses. Well, unfortunately, he died suddenly a couple of days ago at the age of 62. And look, I didn't know him personally, but everyone that's come across him, and they just talk so affectionately about Robin Smith, and I just remember him as being just a very powerful player and one of the few English players that I was scared of as an Australian that could actually hurt us. And I remember in 1993 he made a blistering 167 not out in a limited overs game and dominated that innings. The next highest score in that innings was 36, and 167 not out back in 1993 in a limited overs game was like 350 not out now, the way the game's changed. So, phenomenal player. Sad to see him go at such a young age. And, my thoughts go out to his family, friends, and former teammates.
Absolutely, Menners. I remember he had the mustache and he had the hair that made him look like a judge, of course. And he was really the only England batsman to stand up in that 1989 Ashes series as well. Made a couple of centuries. So he was probably the only one that really took it up to the likes of Merv Hughes and co in that 89 Ashes series. And yeah, he was very open about his struggles with mental health. Quite appropriate and probably quite needed in many ways. When you look at English cricket, we know about the struggles Graham Thorpe had before he sadly passed away last year. So, he was a great advocate in that respect. And, he made a number of media appearances. Listening to him on the radio only, a week ago, Menners? He was part of a lot of the radio forms of coverage for the first test. So, quite sudden, he's passing only days afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. Barrett Sundaresan and Adam Collins dragged him into the SEN box and had a chat with him throughout the test match. And he was up in the media centre and he addressed the English Lions at the request of Andy Flintoff last week. So, it is very sudden. And I guess, in a way, it's good that he got that final sort of moments before he died to tell his story again and see all his old mates in the press box. But yeah, incredibly sad. All right, now moving on. So the next cricket headline, Glenn Maxwell and Faf du Plessis have pulled out of the IPL. The big one for me is Glenn Maxwell. Now, he's struggled with injury lately, Damien, and I just wonder whether Max's career is going to start to wind down now and whether the rigors of a very hectic and long IPL are just too much for his body now.
Potentially, although isn't it the most, and I know he hasn't been necessarily in the absolute best form, but isn't that the most lucrative of the franchise? I know there's a lot of pressure associated with it, but out of his franchise cricket gigs, isn't that the most lucrative?
Oh, absolutely. But he's pulled out of the auction. Faf du Plessis is going to the PSL, and I'm not sure I'm just not sure he can stand up to it anymore.
Maybe. I don't know if it's to do with the pressure or just with the fact now that it's a longer campaign. Maybe that has something to do with it as well. And age catches up with you too, Menners. I think maybe it's just a combination of those things. But, when he was on fire, Menners, he lit that competition up. So I don't think you can understate his contribution to T20 cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, staying on T20 cricket, the WBBL has been rocketing along over the last couple of weeks. And I have to say, I am surprised at this schedule. It's been all over the place, afternoon games, morning games. I do think they need, even with the WBBL, to have just a game every night in prime time that you can follow. But they've been sort of they had a game today at 3:40 in the afternoon in Sydney on a school day. There was nobody there, and it was the Sydney Sixers taking on the Melbourne Stars. I mean, that's a good fixture, but there was no one there. So very weird, the schedule. But I did note an article in news.com.au that the WBBL ratings are, it's the highest average audience across the first 22 games since broadcasters started televising all the games 5 years ago. So the viewing on free-to-air TV is up. I couldn't find many figures on Foxtel's coverage, but, for example, last week, Adelaide versus the Sydney Thunder on free-to-air, it reached over 500,000 people, and there was an average viewership of 60,000 people watching, and that doesn't include Foxtel. But yeah, it says the ratings are good, so I'm glad the ratings are good, Damien. I don't know who's watching it, but people are. But I think it's been very strange.
Yeah, I think with the night games, Menners, if they're on Channel 7, particularly on a Friday night, which is a bit of a graveyard night from a free-to-air TV point of view, where you get repeats of The Devil Wears Prada and Shawshank Redemption every second week, it's actually a good, even if you're not really a massive fan of cricket, it's a good thing to have on in the background. I know a lot of people do watch the cricket on free-to-air on a nighttime schedule, whether it be weeknight or on the weekend, because this, from a TV point of view, it's a good time because unless it's clashing with a test match, there's not a heck of a lot on at that time of the night anywhere around the world, to be honest with you, until you get to the later hours with the English Premier League and things like that. So, with no football to compete with, that's why it gets 500,000 viewers average. Was it an average or was it a reach? I don't take any notice of the reach figures because reach is potential audience. I always look at the average. And
so the average they're saying was 60K on free-to-air only, but you don't know what people, how much people are watching on KO. So maybe you double it, maybe you triple it. I don't know, but I just think this year's schedule has been strange the way it's been, and
I'm guessing
I'm
they're
not
just
sure
trying
of
to
the
shoehorn it in. They're just
Yeah,
trying
I
to
think they
shoehorn
are.
it in because of the World Cup. Yeah.
Just on the points table, so we're recording this on Wednesday night. This afternoon, the Sydney Sixers beat the Melbourne Stars in that afternoon game. So that's left the table with the Hobart Hurricanes on top on 14 points, Melbourne Stars on 11 points, the Sydney Sixers on 11 points, and the Perth Scorchers on 10 points. They're the top four. Adelaide Strikers are on 8 points with 2 games in hand, so there's still a good chance of going through. But the rest of the teams, the Renegades, the defending champs, the Thunder and the Heat, they're going to struggle to make the final. Well, there's the Thunder and the Heat are out, but the Renegades, I guess potentially if results go their way, could sneak in, but generally you'd have to say they're a real long shot. So, Hurricanes looking good to host the final, and the Sixers making a late run the back of Ash Gardner, and the Sixers have 2 games in hand, so they could potentially finish second or even first if the Hurricanes don't win their last game. But the finals are next week, and then the grand finals next week as well, where there's no test match, the gap between the Gabba and the Adelaide Test. So nice little window there for the WBBL, and I'm hoping the Sixers win a game, can host a final, and then I can go to that.
Well, Hobart will be the more consistent side because they have a lot of experienced players, Benders. They've got the likes of Lizelle Lee, Elise Filani, Molly Strano's regained a bit of form this season as well, took a 5 for recently for the Hurricanes. Those players have been around the system for a long, long time now, and I think experience bodes well. They can mentor some of the younger players, and they're a pretty strong side. Finally seeing the fruits, I think, of their labour as well, because they've always had a lot of ability. The Brisbane Heat have been the surprise as to how far they've dropped, because they still have a reasonably good team. They lost Laura Harris, I think, which I suppose is a big loss to their structure. But still with Rodriguez, Redmayne, etc., I thought they'd go a lot better than what they have, because they've always been competitive, the Brisbane Heat.
Yeah, well, Brisbane had 8 wins, no. So 8 games, no wins. So, you couldn't go any worse than that. None from 7.
They made the final last year. So
they did. It's absolutely. It's a huge drop off. And same with Thunder. They were in the finals last year. They've really struggled. But you're right. Hurricanes look really good. I said that when I went to see them play early on in the tournament, that they looked the goods. But the Sydney Sixers, don't count them out. They're making a late run. And any team with, Gardner, Perry, Healy, Cheetle, just to name a few, don't write them off. All right, staying with domestic cricket. All right, actually, no, we're going to take a final break, and then we'll be back. I've got a bit of a serve for the Prime Minister. I don't normally get political here, but Albo's in the gun. So back in a minute. Welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Manners. I'm with Damien Watson, and lots to get to. But I want to start with the PM's 11. So people have been making the case, why didn't England go and play in the PM's 11 game? Why did they send the England Lions? Well, unfortunately, the bloody Prime Minister got married while the PM's 11 game was going on. What a farce. I mean, Albo's made some mistakes in his time in office. This one is the biggest clanger of them all. You've got a PM's 11 game going on, and you're getting married at the same time. How disrespectful to our great game. Would John Howard have done that? Would Bob Hawke have got married while the PM's 11 game was going on? Absolutely not. And I think, I don't know, should the Governor General step in and throw him out? I don't know, but I'm just saying this is a terrible performance. I was listening to Gideon Hay on his podcast talking about how, the PM's 11 game means something, and, it's kind of disrespectful of England not even to go there and send a second team. Well, The PM didn't even give a shit about it. So why should we expect? And there's no way like he knew that the England team wasn't going, because you don't organize a wedding at the last minute. Like he would have been organizing this for months. So not happy with him. But talking about that game in particular, Campbell Kellaway made 82, and it would seem to me, Damien, and there's reports of this that when the Auss team's named, that Kellaway and Renshaw are the two next in line. So Renshaw and Kellaway in that order. And Kellaway's probably leapfrog Constance. You've seen Kellaway down in Victoria. To me, he looks a more composed player, and his game looks more ready for the rigors of Test cricket than Sammy Kay.
I tend to agree in terms of his style. I still think he needs a little bit more time at that domestic level to hone his skills. He's still a youngster coming through, of course, but he shows a lot of promise. I watched him during the winter playing in some Australia A Series manners, and he looked very good with the way his technique is displayed. And I think he's becoming more and more of an aggressive player. He's really improved in that respect rather than being tentative. Not that he was an overly tentative player in the first place, but he's really improved his output in terms of aggression as time has gone on. So I think he's got that right balance in terms of temperament and in terms of when to pull the trigger. So I think he's certainly a player to watch going forward. You're quite right.
Yeah, and Sammy Constant needs to make big runs. He hasn't made big runs since the start of the season. A lot of starts. He made 36 in that PM's 11 game. But he's known to be a century maker. That's what got him into the Australian side. And he needs to get back to those winning ways. And, I've talked about it. He wasn't managed well. It was a heady start to his Test career. And Constance will be back. And, I think the future of Australian cricket is looking very bright with players like Kellaway and Constance. But, good to see Kellaway doing well against that England Lions team. All right, with domestic cricket, the one-day cup is continuing. There was a game played yesterday. At the moment, Tasmania on top of the table, 5 wins from 5 games, 22 points. Queensland in second position on 13 points. New South Wales on 10, South Australia on 10, WA on 8.5 points, and Victoria languishing down the bottom on 4 points. They've done well in the Shield, which we'll come to, but it would appear Tasmania are going to host that one-day cup final. Just a question of who they play against. And in the Sheffield Shield, Victoria, they were 4 from 4 going into the last round and lost to Queensland at the Gabba under lights. So they're still ahead on 33.62 points. Queensland in second position on 25.98 points. And then it's a real logjam. Tasmania 18 points, South Australia 15 points, New South Wales 14 points, and WA 14 points. So apart from Victoria, who have 4 wins, it's pretty close behind that group. So with 5 rounds to go, a lot to play out in the Sheffield Shield. So Damien, I believe you'll be commentating on the Shield this weekend, so the viewers can tune in. Which day?
Yeah, I'll be on Saturday, which is day 3. There is potentially some rain around, so hopefully that doesn't affect things too much. But good to have Shield cricket back at the MCG. We might get an idea of what that wicket looks like ahead of the Boxing Day test. But, yeah, Victoria can really consolidate their spot in the top echelon if they have a big win over WA. And it'd be very, very interesting to see what unfolds. I know WA, they had a very good win over Victoria, as you said, in the One-Day Cup. Managed to chase down that total of around 285 with Concha at ease in the end, with probably about 6 overs to spare and only losing 3 wickets. I know Victoria haven't been going great in that format, but they have a good blend. It'll be interesting to see what happens, though, given things have changed a little bit. We've got more cricket under our belts now. Players have settled in, and there have been changes to the various sides as well. So, yeah, I think Victoria know the conditions pretty well, but never count out WA. They have a pretty good balance.
Absolutely. So this is the last round of Shield cricket before the Big Bash break. So, really important round. All the teams, you want to go into the break with a win. So that'll be going on while the test is going on. Just before I get into some international news, just some local news. I don't know. I don't want to say sad news. Because I think it's more, I feel sorry for the victims more than I do for the perpetrator. But Michael Slater has been removed from the New South Wales Cricket Hall of Fame, and his New South Wales life membership has been revoked. And that's because, he was he was prosecuted for domestic violence charges. So, I think I guess it is a sad story about the demise of Michael Slater, but I just feel sorry for the victims of domestic abuse. And Slater's a serial offender. It says in reports that he battles alcoholism, and but yeah, I mean, he's really lost in the wilderness now, and I hope he gets the help and can heal. But it sounds like he's performed really badly, some really heinous crimes.
Yeah, and I think you look at the way he exited the Australian team all those years ago, Menas, maybe the warning signs were there to a certain degree as well. It's been a massive fall from grace, hasn't it? You can't think there's been a few falls from grace in cricket in general, but certainly in Australian cricket, right up there, because not only was he a cricketer for a long time, Menas at the top level and an accomplished one at that, but also was a well-known media performer and was a very good host as well. And that's fallen by the wayside. Even when the rights changed hands from Channel 9 to Channel 7, he was one of the few that was selected to go across. So that showed you how in demand he was. But when you are the perpetrator of domestic violence, you should be roundly punished. And it's good to see that that's the case, that people can't get away with it.
Absolutely. And I'm always looking for dirt on people around media boxes, and he was the only one that I would get dirt on. People would say we just don't like working with him and it's difficult to work with. So I'm not going to say who said that, but more than one person. So yeah, I don't think there's any surprise that he's obviously very sick man. All right, so on from that news to the last thing I wanted to touch on before Can't Let It Go is, since we last recorded this, India have been hammered at home by South Africa. They lost the Test series 2-0. So to give you some stats to underline what a staggering demise India have been undergoing under the hands of Gautam Gambhir at home, they lost the second Test by 408 runs, which is their biggest margin of runs defeat. And also they've lost now 3 home series at home whitewashed. So they've been only whitewashed 3 times at home. The first one was by South Africa in 2000. The last 2 have been in the last year. They were whitewashed against New Zealand last year, and they've been whitewashed against South Africa this year. For South Africa, Simon Harmer took 17 wickets at the crazy average of 8.94, which is the best average for a South African in a Test series and the second best for anyone in India with a minimum of 15 wickets. And Temba Bavuma now has 11 Test wins out of 12 games, captain, the most by any captain without a defeat. It's an incredible series. Simon Harmer obviously went and played for Essex for a long time, took the cold back, but he's back. He's got an incredible Test record. But, Damien, you have to say now, this is not just a blip in the radar. India are going through a bit of a cataclysmic free fall. This rebuilding is not going to plan because, you would expect India, while they're rebuilding, still to be able to perform well at home, but maybe struggle a bit away. But, to be whitewashed at home in 2 series in a year, that's just quite incredible. And I can't see Gambhir lasting much longer.
I'm probably in the same camp as you. The results speak for themselves. Should give credit to South Africa, Menas, with the limited Test cricket they're playing. They're playing pretty well. And the amazing thing is, I don't think they play another Test match for quite a number of months. So they're the reigning world Test champions. So they've beaten India, whitewashed India on their home turf, and yet they're not playing much Test cricket. So I don't know where that leaves us, whether that shows because they have less of a demanding schedule, that whether that helps them, whether that's an indictment on South Africa that they don't get maybe the credit in their home nation that they deserve either. But it does show that South African cricket is back as well after they went through a bit of a trough a few years back.
Well, as well, they're the World Test champions, and I guess, they could say now, well, we really are the best Test team in the world. We beat Australia, we've beaten India at home, and so, fair play to them. It's a great performance. Unfortunately for Australia, I think, if we missed our window with India because they were still strong 2 years ago when we went there, and maybe in 2027 when we're next due there, they'll have rebuilt the side. There's rumours that Kohli's going to come back to Test cricket. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But yeah, just a staggering loss for India at home, and This team is in disarray. The conditions they're rolling out, these pitches that turn square from day one, they're not doing India any favors as well. I mean, because it makes the opposition spinners better. It brings the teams closer together because it's a crazier test match. So anyway, interesting stuff. I just hope Australia can go to India and win there in 2 years, because now everybody's doing it. New Zealand have done it. South Africa have done it. It's Australia's turn.
I know. Maybe that's an indictment on our side from a couple of years ago, Menders, that they didn't perform better. But, the Indian quality was still stacked then. So, I can't explain it either, because it's not like New Zealand and South Africa have a significant amount of exposure to those types of conditions either.
No, absolutely. All right, now let's wrap up this episode of Cricket Unfiltered with Can't Let It Go, that little bit of cricket news you just can't let go, through to the keeper. I'll start because I've got a good one. Have a listen to this clip from Quick Info. It has Steve Waugh and Harsha Bhogle, and it's from 2010, before Steve Smith had made his test debut.
You get excited watching some of the young Aussie players? Is there someone you see and say, wow?
Yeah, look, this young Steve Smith is probably the most talented cricketer we've seen for the last 20 years in Australia. He's going to make a huge impact on the international scene pretty shortly. Then you've got young blokes like Josh Hazlewood, Mitchell Stark from New South Wales, Patterson from Victoria. These are all quick bowlers who are going to make a big impact. And we'll probably have the first Muslim-born player to play for Australia within the next 12 months in Usman Khawaja. So there's exciting times on the horizon for Australian cricket.
Well, how prophetic from Steve Waugh. He absolutely nailed it. And his predictions were spot on. I guess the only one he got slightly wrong was James Pattinson, who didn't end up playing as much test cricket as maybe we would have hoped. But, his body really let him down. So that's my Can't Let It Go. Steve Waugh, just the oracle, somebody who we should be listening to. When Steve Waugh speaks, George Bailey and co should listen to his wise words. And quickly before Damien goes, my other Can't Let It Go was Monty Panesar was playing fourth grade for Campbelltown on the weekend and took a 5-wicket haul. Just like, what a significant downgrade for Monty to be playing fourth grade. I would have thought like Greg Matthews was playing first grade at Monty's age. Like that's a bit of a credit. Kudos to Greg Matthews. He was playing fifth grade, like well into his 50s. Sorry, first grade, well into his 50s. And Monty slipped down to fourth grade. I mean, he's not that old. Anyway,
maybe it was a hair transplant that did it for Greg Benners. Gave him some superpowers or something.
Maybe.
Probably could have lasted longer as well at international level, Greg Matthews. But, I mean, Monty, one of the great characters, Monty Panesar as well. A lot of the Australians really loved him when he came over here. So it's no surprise he's feeding off that here as well. And, look, good on him. He still loves playing cricket, so why not? I think it's a good thing, and good to have that exposure to the masses as well.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're a youngster or even anybody and you go out and Monty Panesar's at the other end, that's a bit of fun. You can try and do a Gilchrist and smack him out of the attack.
Yeah. Was it the pace bowler in that same test match at the Wacker all those years ago? Mahmood? Was it? He didn't last all that long either, was he, for England? I can't let it go, Menners. I got to say, kudos. We mentioned the WBBL before. One team I didn't really emphasise upon was the Melbourne Stars. Kudos to them. They've been bottom of the barrel for the last couple of seasons, roughly, and certainly last season. And they've got themselves up into second position on the table at the moment. Helps when you have the likes of Meg Lanning, but also Sophie Day's had a fantastic season with the ball. They've got young players coming through like Reece McKenna, etc., who've got a bright future. So good on the Melbourne Stars, and you never know, they might be in that echelon. I still think the Hurricanes on top, but the Stars might be amongst the challengers along with the Sixers.
I saw Millie Illingworth got signed by the WPL, the Women's Premier League, and Nicola Carey did as well. So players to watch. Yeah, but great stuff. And, I think this climax to the WBBL is going to be great.
Just on the WBBL, did you notice they were potentially one ball away from a result at the Adelaide Oval, and the umpires called them off in a bit of a farce, and it was a no result at the end. So you'd be absolutely spewing if you were the Sydney Thunder. Yeah,
to me, that sort of sums up the way this WBBL has gone this year. That was a big stuff up. I think, Alistair Dobson spoke afterwards and said, you know, they either should have gone off earlier, but if they didn't go off earlier, they needed to stay out and finish the game. That was basically the sentiment, that probably in hindsight, they should have gone off a bit earlier in that rain. But if you're going to stay out there that long, you probably got to finish the game. All right. Well, that's it for this edition of Cricket Unfiltered. We will be back. We'll be back after every day of the test. I've got a mate joining me tomorrow to wrap up the first day. And then basically about 10, 15 minutes after play, I'll be live reviewing the day's play. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Just remember, if you want to get a great Cricket Unfiltered t-shirt, go to the link in the episode notes. There's also the NordVPN link if you need a VPN. There's plenty of reasons to need a VPN right now. You know, if you're traveling and you need to protect your data, there's a link in the episode notes so you get a great deal. Remember, I listen to some other cricket podcasts, you know, like the show, review the show, subscribe to the show. You know, I'm terrible at those things. I get too caught up in talking cricket and ranting about the English, but support the show. You know, it's a big summer for Cricket Unfiltered. You know, I got Jim Carnegie in the comments for this YouTube, and he's mentioning that the grade cricketer and Final Word have been talking smack about me. They just haven't.
Really?
They didn't know. They mentioned me, which I played on the last show, but they just don't have they don't want to beef. They know, and I don't want to beef either. I'm trying to be better. So Jim, it's not going to work. Barrett is a great guy. You know, I like this. Jim's trying to rile me up in the comments, but it's not going to work. I'm trying to be better. I said it in the last episode. I'm just trying to put all the beefs behind me, apart from the English, and just look forward, not backwards. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in to Cricket Unfiltered. Damien, thanks for joining me. Catch him on the cricket coverage on Sunday, and we'll be back after day one of the Gabba test.